Hey, this is Niels on Dynasty. Please like, share, and subscribe. Buy yourself some silver, platinum, and crystallized osmium because that's just a smart thing to do. And be kind, helpful, and grateful because it's also the smart thing to do. But that's not what this is about. This is about Nord Stream pipeline being cut and questions I had. Everyone's saying they did it, they did it, they did it, they did it. And I was like, okay, well, whoever did it, people actually know. Countries actually know who did it. They've got intelligence agencies, they got satellites, they got all kinds of things. They know who did it. And I was like, okay, well, what are the ramifications going to be of that? I bring you what's going on with shipping, episode 114. I already hit the like button. You guys like? I would just subscribe to this guy. He's pretty knowledgeable.
At the ship, we look at the shipping situation in the Black Sea and the Red Sea. We'll discuss the labor negotiations going on along the U.S. East and Gulf Coast ports.
Don't care about any of that.
The Biden and Trump administration.
Don't care about any of that.
Toward offshore oil and wind. And finally, we'll look at U.S. LNG exports. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to this week's episode. We're back on track with a weekly look at the ship. We're going to cover the top 5 maritime stories as of January 5th. 2025. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos.
If you're new to the channel,
as they come out.
Hit the bell.
So one of the biggest stories of the past week has been the plight of the tanker Eagle S. This is the Cook Island tanker that was outbound out of Russia, coming through the Gulf of Finland when the ship dragged its port anchor and snatched up a series of cables.
It drug its port anchor, so it was running, it dropped its anchor, and it hit all these lines
between Estonia and Finland. Finland ordered the vessel to stop. They eventually boarded the vessel, ordered the ship into Finnish waters, and are now at this point conducting an inspection of the vessel. This is the first story from G Captain. Finland begins port state inspection on detained Eagle S. This is from Bloomberg. Finland began a so-called port state control inspection. I'm not sure why they call it so-called. This is a very typical inspection of the detained Eagle S tanker that's being held after undersea cable ruptures last week, seeking a probe if the vessel meets international safety norms. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, there are a series of memorandum of understandings between nations that allow countries to conduct what are called port state control inspections. This is not... Again, I don't know why they call it so-called. Finland is inspecting the vessel to ensure it meets with all the requirements. It is registered, it has insurance, it is classified. In other words, there's an outside classification agency that's doing it. Now, there's a bit of a question about whether Finland could have stopped this vessel, and in my determination, Finland can stop the vessel. The ship is entitled to what's called innocent passage. Under Article 19 of UNCLOS, you have the right of innocent passage. However, if you're not doing an innocent passage, if you're doing something that is not innocent, in this case, dragging your port anchor and ripping up fiber optic cables and electrical cables on the ocean surface, that's not innocent. And so Finland had every right. Finland asked the vessel to stop. The vessel did stop. They then boarded the vessel. They then sent on a security detachment and had the ship sail into Finnish waters. Now, there's some confusion here about what happens next. This story from Reuters: Finnish court upholds seizure of Russian oil tanker amid cable probe. There was an effort by a lawyer, a Finnish lawyer, hired by the shipping company. We don't know what he looks like. We'll assume this is him. But he came before a Finnish court and asked the ship to be released so that it would not be iced in and stuck, because that would do undue harm to the vessel and the crew. The Finns said no to that, and understand the ship is just currently being held. If, however, the ship is arrested, and yes, ships can be arrested. Ships are treated in admiralty law like human beings. They can be held susceptible for damage. And if the owners of the pipelines and the undersea cables and the electrical cables determine that damage was done, then they can hold the ship and cargo responsible, in which case the ship would be arrested. And if the company did not make the restitutions, then the cargo and ship could be sold so that restitutions could be had. Now, this is not new. We have been seeing an escalation in what has been happening in the Baltic. This story from Reuters.
An escalation of this. That's only one. Look at these dates. January 3rd.
gives you a good timeline
Right
of
there.
what happened. So
Now,
obviously we have the cutting of the internet and power cables here by Eagle S in December. Back in November, we saw the Baltic telecom cables being severed. This happened on November 17th and 18th. This was the actions by the Chinese bulk carrier Yiping 3 after the ship left the Russian port of Ust-Luga on November 15th. The ship was held in international waters between Denmark and Sweden. The Chinese flag state, which is where the ship was registered, did an inspection on board with Swedish officials in accompanying them. However, no guilt was found and the ship was allowed to sail, and the ship is now sailing out in the Atlantic. Back in October of 2023, there was the Baltic Connector gas pipe and cables. This is when New Polar Bear dragged its anchor on October 8th of 2023. Uh, I did a video on this, talked about the fact that this looked like it may have been an accident. However, obviously, the number of occurrences of this makes it extremely disturbing. And then the largest one that we had was back in September of 2022 with the Nord Stream blast.
okay, now that started it. That's the first one. The other four are retaliatory, in my opinion, for the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. This is actually the first I've heard of all of this. I haven't been keeping an eye on it, even though I have been interested in the repercussions of the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up. And it seems like now the repercussions are there seems to be a lot of boats, unfortunately, dropping their port anchors and pulling up fiber optic cable lines, electrical lines, and other kinds of cable lines between nation states, which is interesting. And I just figured you guys ought to know what has been going on after the Nord Stream pipeline happened. It looks like forces, I don't know, countries, forces, whatever, are retaliating in some fashion, no, by dropping their anchors and tearing up lines. It's amazing how such a big ocean, you can do it at the right same spot, right exact spot. I would call that retaliation. But, that's why it's not making the news. That's why I'm telling you about it. Have a great night. Remember, be kind, helpful, grateful. Be the best you can be today.